I, in particular, have been so looking forward to sharing this information as we're going into a season unlike any other. So, thank you for sharing your time and your wisdom. Much appreciated. I'd like to introduce everybody, our panelists tonight. John Lilburn is a clinical social worker and therapist. He specializes in dealing with disruptive events with families. His family is active in our Sunday school and youth programs at UCC. And tonight, John will share some big picture ideas about family stresses and coping during COVID, which is obviously a disruptive event. Joyce Hawker is a clinical psychologist, author, and all around wise woman. She's a pillar at UCC and frequently leads small groups and book studies. Joyce will share some thoughts about difficult conversations, planning talks with family, and stress relief for adults. Courtney Arnson is an ordained Presbyterian pastor in Missoula who has recently embarked on a new venture as a community chaplain and spiritual director, offering her skills and care to folks in our community beyond and within the traditional church setting. She's also a parent and has dipped her toe in our UCC Missoula community through church school and worship. She will be talking about her perspective as a parent and sharing some great progressive faith based Advent and Christmas resources for families, including a bunch that we'll be able to actually get our hands on tonight. And Julian Stickney is a licensed clinical professional counselor and art therapist who works primarily with families and children who have experienced trauma. She leads a monthly art and meditation group at UCC called The Muse is In with our pastor Laura Folkwine. And Julian will share some ideas for holiday crafts for families and kids tonight. So a wonderful broad range of things, conversation and ideas tonight. And I thank you all for being here.
Thanks so much, Valerie. I am just happy to kind of be tonight's facilitator. I'm Reverend Laura Folkwine, the Associate Pastor at UCC. I just want to start us out with a little breath. If you haven't yet taken a deep breath today, I encourage you to do that now. Or maybe three. And I want to just share a short reading from this little book that my mom reshared with me called Christmas is for Celebrating by Melvin Wheatley Jr. He was a United Methodist bishop who I think has passed on at this point. But it's just about just remembering what we're doing with Christmas. And this is a little section where he shared a portion from the story of the Velveteen Rabbit, which probably ages me a little bit, but the Velveteen Rabbit is all about being real, and how being real is actually about getting a little bit dirty and bumped and needing patches. And being real also means that you've been loved. So he's connecting the story of the Velveteen Rabbit with Christmas. Wheatley writes, well, celebrants of Christmas become people who do understand realness. They understand that they are real, and everybody is real because somebody called God has loved them into being real. Such is the message of the Christmas manger. It keeps telling us about a God who is forever luring the highest qualities from the humblest quarters, turning secular settings into holy ground, and making ordinary tasks flame with a special meaning. As surely as you and I celebrate Christmas by preparing our lives for that kind of God to come into our midst, we shall make our own amazing discovery. The amazing discovery is that the holy is already here. So I just want to start the evening with that reminder that the holy is here, that you actually don't have to do anything extra to get God in the room, that God is with you, and that, if they're out of turkeys for Thanksgiving, it's still going to be Thanksgiving. And if Christmas is a total, show, the baby Jesus is still coming. So I hope that that's just a word of assurance. And we'll get started with that. John, if you will start us off.
All right, thank you, Laura. So I think I'm just going to jump right in here. Going first, I'm going to try really hard to stay in my lane and not talk about what the speakers following me are supposed to cover. And if I stray from that, I apologize in advance. So I think there's two things that I really want to cover today. One is the idea of how we make meaning of events and circumstances and thoughts in our lives. And the other thought that I have is to cover the idea of ambivalence. And not in the common sense of being wishy-washy or dithering or being undecided about something, but the clinical sense and the formal sense of ambivalence of having contradictory thoughts or ideas or feelings about different things, people, events at the same time. So it's a state of being of having being of two minds about one particular topic. So, and this is a way to kind of get to how we respond to events in a healthy way and then in a less healthy or unhelpful way. So how we make meaning of COVID and how we make meaning of the holidays during COVID is dependent on lots of things, but we can think about it as a combination of our lived experiences, the information that we receive, the consistency or the lack of consistency between our information sources, and whether there is consistency or inconsistency in how the world around us responds to and understands COVID, or Christmas for that matter. So if anyone is paying even remote attention to things, we have these very deep divisions in our political systems, in our news media, and our government responses to COVID. And they're deeply inconsistent and really somewhat chaotic. And this can lead to ambivalence, having contradictory thoughts and feelings about COVID on top of perhaps the contradictory thoughts and feelings we have about the holidays in general. And this ambivalence can lead to anxiety, depression, or just good old-fashioned stress. So making meaning in ambivalence, and that's what I'm going to be trying to cover a little bit here. You know, with in my family and with I think any family group, there can be deep disagreements surrounding COVID, and not everyone is going to be responding in the same way. And that's probably even, there's internal inconsistencies too. And I think that's one of the hardest things about COVID is one day it'll be like, no, you can't have a play date, or we can't have grandma and grandpa over. But another day we're like, well, maybe we can. And, you know, that's our ambivalence playing out. You know, our ambivalence is we need to stay safe in COVID. We have to be responsible members of the community. And also we want our children and ourselves to experience the things that are healthy, and we want them to be connected to family members. We want them to be connected to events. We want them to be connected to the spirituality that's all around us. And so we come across as a little flaky sometimes. And the only real way to do that is to acknowledge our ambivalence. And when we're explaining it to each other and to our children especially, we have to integrate that ambivalence that's inside of us. So for example, like, yes, we want to stay really safe, and we're going to take these steps to make sure grandpa and grandma stay safe, yet we also want to make sure that we are supporting them and supporting each other during this really difficult time. And to also acknowledge that we don't have all the right answers, and that, you know, especially with older kids who are getting this bombardment of conflicting information and worldviews surrounding COVID, that we try to acknowledge all those as well, that we don't have all the answers, that there's lots of unknowns out there about COVID, yet we're doing our best to kind of thread that needle and do the best that we can. So, you know, another piece of the ambivalence that really needs to be addressed is that our families or ourselves we can be both fortunate and also suffer losses. They're not incompatible. You know, like my family, Sarah and myself's family, we have suffered losses. They haven't been catastrophic. They haven't significantly interrupted our lives, but we have. So, and they're real, even though they're not catastrophic losses. And grief and loss is not about comparing our loss to somebody else's loss or against some cosmic scale of what's a real loss and what's a fake loss. So yes, have some perspective and interject that into the conversations that you have, but try not to minimize or disregard losses simply because they're not quote unquote big enough. So, you know, I think a lot of our holiday traditions are really associated, or how we feel about holidays are really closely associated with the traditions or activities that we do around the holidays. And this is where families can get, you know, their own family traditions. And if you think back to your own childhood, there's certain things that meant Christmas or that meant Thanksgiving. And losing those traditions can feel like losing the holidays. So if part of the holiday tradition is getting family together and they can't come, it can feel like the holiday is gone too, or we're missing out on the holiday as a whole. So I think the start of it is to work through that ambivalence that we feel. Yes, we are not going, you know, oh, sorry, we can't be with grandma and grandpa, or yes, we can. Here's why. Here's how we feel about it. We're glad to be keeping them safe, yet we're scared. Yet we're sad to be not be around them this holiday season, but we're also happy that we're keeping them safe. And vice versa is true as well. You know, if you are going to take some risks and have people over or do some things that you don't feel great about or you're unsure of, acknowledge that. It's like, we choose to do this, yet we know there's some risk involved. So I think if we work on the meanings and acknowledge the meanings that we have in our traditions, and you know, we're really good about talking about that with our families, we can also think about how we can make or incorporate that same meaning into different activities. So if, you know, for many of us, going to Christmas Eve service is a really important part of Christmas, and it won't feel like Christmas without gathering together at church. So acknowledge that loss, acknowledge why it can't happen, be happy that that's a decision you're making for the good of yourselves and others in the community, and try to substitute that with something else. Perhaps, you know, instead of going to Christmas Eve service, you'll gather together and sing carols or hymns together as a family. You know, and COVID also is, perhaps it's a disruptive event for sure, and disruptive events can be helpful. And in this case, maybe this COVID disrupted holiday season would be a chance to change some of those holiday traditions that you've always wanted to or weren't completely comfortable with, and you wanted to try something new. So yeah, try to make it happen. And what comes to mind for me was this past Halloween. You know, my children weren't. We didn't allow our children to go out trick or treating, but instead we had a scavenger haunted house in our basement, and it was great. I smile about it every time I think about it, and the kids remember it. So we've started a new tradition, but we definitely had something that at least partially made up for the fact that they couldn't go trick or treating, and of course we had bags of candy. So some of this stuff can be profound, and some of it can be really simple. And maybe that's the final takeaway. I don't know how I'm doing on time, but it doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to have some super slick solution for getting through the COVID holidays. You can kind of limp through. And if you happen to go overboard on presents, if you're able to, or if you do extra things for the kids, or you might have a little too many treats or candies around, well, that's okay too, because it doesn't have to be perfect. So how am I doing on time there, Laura?
You're about out.
Good. Then
Do you have a final word? All right.
Yeah, I think.
Thank you so much.
Stop while I'm ahead. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm glad to follow John because, John, you said something that I think is so very important. Just a second. Okay, I had to click a few things off. I love that you talked about perfection and giving up perfection. That's where I was going to start. And I could have, but didn't choose to take time to read Mary Oliver's wonderful poem, Wild Geese, to you. Some of you know it. She starts out saying, you do not have to be good. You do not have to crawl on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. And then she goes on to give us wise advice about what we can do instead of trying to be perfect at this time. So I'm really glad John brought this out. I made a list of stressors, and then I thought, well, that's a terribly depressing place to start because you know those better than I do. And I'll just pick out a few that I have become aware of in our own family and that I remember from the past. Gary's son and wife live in Durango with their 2 children, and our 12-year-old grandson, Oren, is having a very hard time with anxiety. He wants his parents to explain what's happening and what the numbers mean, and he misses his friends, and he goes back and forth between regressing to being younger than he is, to being mad, to being scared. And his parents are doing a really good job of working with him. And I'm sure that all of you are having various conversations with your children about what is happening and trying to soothe them and enlighten them and encourage them in every way you can. As I was thinking about what's helped most in my own family past, families that I've been part of, I thought I would do 2 things. You, I'm sure, have your version of the family meeting. I want to share a version that I used to use a lot and that I've taught to a lot of families. And then I'm going to close with talking about what you might do for yourself, you parents, for stress reduction for you. It's not all about the kids for the holidays. Sometimes it's about the grown-ups. So I'll start with the family meeting, which is something that I learned partly in my childhood. Our folks often got us around to have a meeting, and we talked about various things that were coming up in family life. Everybody got to say what they wanted to. My sister and I found out to our dismay that you didn't vote in a family meeting. And we were really disappointed about that because one time my dad had a chance to take a pastorate in Hawaii. And Janice and I thought, oh, good, there are 3 kids and 2 adults. And so if we vote, we'll win. And we had to learn the hard way that that's really not the way family meetings work. They really work on consensus and collaboration. So here's some ideas for setting up family meetings, which I really recommend that you think about doing during this winter time when you're home more. both for holidays and for any other reason. The first idea is to set a regular time, whatever that time is that works for you. It's a good idea to keep a discussion agenda on a whiteboard or up where everybody can see it. And anybody in the family can put up an idea to discuss for the next family meeting. And it's up to the convener, one of the parents probably, or an older child, to decide what you have time to talk about. But it's a good idea for people to be seeing what folks in the family want to talk about. And then you have your meeting at a regular time. I think an hour is plenty long enough. If you have really little ones, that's too long, and you'll know what to do about that. The parents can model how to lead the meeting. Some guidelines are this, that we say everybody gets to say what's important to them and what they hope for, and nobody gets to criticize each other, because this is a problem-solving meeting. The purpose of a family meeting is to solve problems that are there in the family. And also, I usually think it's a great idea not to have devices at the meeting other than a whiteboard and something like that. And then the parents and the older kids can model really good communication, such as rephrasing. So say one of the kiddos says, I hate that we can't go anywhere for Thanksgiving. It's going to be totally boring just to have the four of us sitting around the table. It's dumb and it's stupid. And so the parent or the convener could say, well, I'm getting a really clear idea that you're unhappy about what might be our plans. And let me remind you that we're here to solve some problems. And so you really want us to know that you're very worried about just having the four of us, and worried that it won't be fun and it won't be the way it usually is. Is that what you're saying? And then, you're modeling active listening, and the child can say more about that. And then the convener parent can say, let's come up with some ideas that'll make it more fun for you and for all of us that we might do. And then you start brainstorming. And as you know, in brainstorming, the idea is not to criticize or make a decision quickly, but just to say, okay, let's keep track of that. We could have a Zoom dessert with all of our extended family. What a good idea. Okay, what's another thing we could do to make it fun? We could have somebody says, let's don't have turkey, let's have something different, let's have pizza. And then you could say, okay, let's talk about what we might like to have in case we don't want to have the traditional meal. And you go on like that, brainstorming. And then you make a decision at the end, not by fiat, but say, okay, it sounds like what we really do want to do is get together on Zoom with, and then you name the people. And we'll just do that when we're having dessert. Does that sound like a good idea? If that came up as something. And then you could say, we still don't know what to do about the menu. And because we're running out of time and we want to get to what Susan put on the agenda, I'm going to say we're going to talk about that next week. We can take one more week before we do that. And then you look for constructive solutions, obviously, in the family meeting, while complimenting the kids and the parents or your partner for coming up with good ideas. The leader keeps track of time and of the ideas, and then brings it to a close, and then says, okay, so we're going to try this for a week. We're going to try these ideas that we came up with, and we're going to check back next week on Saturday morning. Okay with everybody? And then you close. So no decision during a family meeting is a done deal. Laura's giving me a 2-minute thing. So you check back. I want to say some things about stress relief for you adults, for all of us. Giving up perfection is probably the best idea that we could come up with. And that means perfection about the house, about your expectations, about how the kids are acting, about school, certainly, your jobs, certainly, and even your mood. I cannot tell you how much I hear my friends and clients criticizing themselves for not feeling a certain way. And we can give up perfection about how we actually feel. Be sure to plan for some downtime for you adults, whatever it takes, however you can give that to each other. If you have a partner, you can help each other. Be sure to remember the basics of exercise, sleep, time with friends, whether it's on Zoom or walking outside, time with your partner, and time where you're not the only responsible person in the room. I keep hearing from folks I'm talking to about how hard it is to be the only one holding it together. And sometimes it's important to get a break from that. So I'm going to stop. But remember, this is not about perfection. It's about love. It's about conversation with each other, making decisions based on that conversation, and just doing the best we can. Okay, thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Joyce. You're getting some silent applause here. I think this is all making sense and feeling reassuring. Julian, you are next.
Okay. So I have a screen share. Hopefully it's going to work. Okay. Can you guys see it?
No, I wonder if we're not able to screen share. Oh, here it comes.
Okay. You can
Great.
see it?
Yes.
Okay. So this is Christmas craft ideas and family art prompts, COVID style Christmas 2020. Joyce, I really appreciate everything you said about families going through so much right now. And I think a big part of it too is just making sure that we have good self-care. So one of the things I think is so much fun to do, and I see kids do these all the time, and when I was seeing people in my office before I went totally telehealth, we would make snowflakes. And now I have kids on Zoom that are like, I'm making snowflakes, and they were making them this summer too. So you can create your own snowflakes, and there is a YouTube for 6 DIY amazing paper snowflake crafts that you can do. And then there's a step-by-step picture tutorial, which I really liked. It's very easy. And this is actually a picture from there at the bottom of the snowflakes you can make that are really simple. And like I said, you can click on these links, go to some of these links. I'll click on one so you can kind of see. But if you don't want to do anything on YouTube and you just want it to be completely, oops, sorry. Okay. All right. So all you need is paper, scissors, and you can use a protractor if you really want, but you probably don't need one. You can make a paper square. You start out with a really simple paper square rectangle, fold diagonally in half. And then you come up with a triangle and fold the resulting triangle in half again. And then if you really want to use that nifty protractor, then you divide the triangle into 3 sections. And you're going to just cut the sections after you've folded. And it goes through a whole series of things, and there's not a video. And then you fold the right section and you flip the shape. Anyways, you can go through and read through most of this, but it's really neat because you can cut random shapes until you get a 6-point or 6-sided snowflake. So it's kind of fun to do. There's other snowflakes that you can do as well, and I think that are really helpful. And this is kind of just a neat website to check out. Another one is create your own Christmas tree. It's a Christmas countdown. I have lots of kids right now that are saying that they're just really sad because Christmas is going to be different this year. So this is also a Pinterest idea, and this is from the Dollar Tree. So you can actually get all these supplies from the Dollar Tree. And as you know, we all love going to the Dollar Tree because it's cheap. And if you don't want to spend a lot of money this year, this is a great way. But you actually make your own Christmas countdown, kind of like your own little calendar to Christmas Day. And I thought this was adorable. And you can get on the Pinterest video and check this out. This is a lot of fun. And actually, I think I might want to try this myself because it's so simple to do. And then, sorry, I'm just trying to figure out how to do the next slide. Okay. This is an art idea that I came up with. I do this one with kids, draw yourself as a superhero, but this one is draw yourself as an elf. So I thought this would be really fun. Like get your family together, have everyone draw themselves as an elf. You can hang yourselves or your elf selves on the refrigerator, on the mantle, or anywhere else in the house. And then when you see one another's elf in the house, you must say something cheery and Christmas-like to them. No Scrooges here. Just something like Merry Christmas, or maybe a line from the Elf movie. And then something extra fun is to watch the movie Elf for inspiration, or just for fun, because Elf is one of our favorite movies and we watch it every year. And this would be a really good family fun thing to do, and also create your elf. Another really fun idea we came up with is indoor snow fort. This is the family Christmas s'mores and coloring. So like this is a variation on creating your own fort, but you can use pillows, blankets, whatever. It's funny because I was literally on a session with a kid, and a child had made a small fort and invited me inside that fort on the telehealth video. And so children are being really creative and they're doing these things. And I was like, oh my gosh, this would be so amazing to create a fort for Christmas. And in your little pillow fort that you guys all create together, you can make s'mores, get some little peppermint chocolate squares, some marshmallows, whatever you want, candy, and then have some hot chocolate and some candy canes, and eat that inside your little pillow fort or your blanket fort with everyone in there. You can sing songs or play Christmas music. And then you use colored pencils, crayons, paper, and draw your own igloo, or write a letter to Santa, or maybe create a family Christmas drawing. Or, you could add in the people that maybe aren't there right now for Christmas. You can say, let's create a drawing of, grandma and grandpa and our aunts and uncles and cousins, and maybe whoever else is far away, and we can bring them into our special Christmas fort. And do this while sipping on your treats and eating your s'mores, and just make it fun, but something to do indoors. A lot of the kids that I work with, teenagers, they're really connecting online with one another. Minecraft is huge. It was huge before COVID. It'll be huge after COVID. and also kids are getting on and playing a game called Among Us too, but I didn't want to incorporate that one. It's a little bit more violent. But the Minecraft one is one that kids are constantly talking about. They're meeting with friends online. So I found some different websites that are kind of fun, but this one I thought was the neatest. It is an ornament. You can create a Minecraft ornament. It's really simple. I'll just click on this link. So you can actually get all this stuff probably at Michael's, but it's really simple. They've got paints. You would want to use Mod Podge, which is kind of like a special glue for arts and crafts. There's these little wooden blocks, and you can print out stuff, or you can paint your own little Minecraft pictures on them, like the little eyes and the face, if it's something you enjoy doing, or if your kid is really good at crafting. And we'll scroll down, but it basically gives you all the supplies you need, including the Mod Podge. And you can even get like Mod Podge that has glitter in it too, because it's just more fun if you want like a glitter ornament. So there's different ones, and ribbon. And there is a little bit of drilling involved if you want to drill. So you would want to do that on your own. Or I'm sure you could probably just use some kind of a wood glue if you didn't really want to drill anything into it. So it's kind of a fun ornament idea. Again, Minecraft seems to be a big thing. A lot of parents are like, I don't want my kids online doing this kind of stuff, but Minecraft really isn't that bad. And I think it's something that kids are connecting through, and this is just a way to be able to kind of meet them where they're at. Like, hey, let's do a fun Minecraft ornament. Another Minecraft thing I found is paper toys. So you could basically print out for free paper, and you can print those off. There is like a Minecraft Santa that you can print out and make, and you can click on those links. So that's kind of fun. And then the last one that I have is Christmas lights and make your own peace light. So we know that the holidays are going to be really different this year. The downtown lighting ceremony, they've already said that it's going to be different, but you can go downtown, drive around and look at the lights. They're calling it the reverse parade of lights, and that's going to be at the U of M campus. And there's a little article about it that you can read on and click on, and you can go there and be able to see some of the stuff that they normally have. They just are not wanting people to drive downtown like they would with the normal parade this year. And the idea behind that is just to protect people with COVID and not to meet in big crowds right now. But the nice thing is that because we gather around light and warmth, we oftentimes find peace with one another. And because light to me is a symbol of hope, I think creating a homemade peace sign would be a really neat idea. So I've included a YouTube video on here. I'm not gonna play it, but you can get on, and there's 3 different DIY ways to make a homemade peace sign. So hopefully some of these things will help with the Christmas holiday, getting in the spirit, help with some of the feelings of grief and isolation and just being different this year. So just wanted to share those with you all. Hope you can use some of those ideas, and I can definitely send that link to Laura and Valerie so that you all can send that out to families and kids can look at those and they can create together. So I hope you guys all have a happy holidays. Thank you.
Thanks, Julian.
Thanks so much for inviting me. And as I listen to the other panelists, I just hear a lot of the same message. And I'm coming from the perspective of a pastor, so I will try not to preach. And as a parent, I have a 7-year-old and a 12-year-old. And I just was making notes all over my notes thinking, oh yeah, that's what I was gonna say that. And I'm so glad to hear so many common themes. The first thing that I wanted to say, which I think all of us have said in some way, is that grief is just gonna keep showing up. It's going to show up over and over again. It's going to show up in ourselves. It's going to show up in our kids. It's going to be tantrums, either ours or our kids. It's going to be down days that just are sad. Or it's going to be a kid yelling, well, why can't we, blah, 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 blah. There's just so many ways, and it's gonna keep coming because we're entering into a new season of grief. This is always a season of grief for so many people. And this year that's just magnified for all of us in some way, whether it is the grief of not being able to do what we would normally do this time of year. And so recognizing that and being open to that and not trying to shut it down on ourselves or on anybody else that we're around, allowing that to come out however it may, which is what I heard both John and Joyce also say. And one of the things then that as a person of faith that I think of is Advent is the season of waiting and anticipating something that isn't yet here. And I think of Malachi through Matthew and those years and years and years and years of wondering where the hell is God? And if ever there was an Advent for us to ask that question, perhaps this is the season. And for us to give our kids and our families permission to ask that question as well. And then I would say we take our grief and we try to think about what are the values that we hold that stem from that grief. Like, oh, I'm so bummed that I can't be with my family over Thanksgiving. What is the value that I hold about that particular day or that holiday or that season that seems so important? And maybe it's family. And then, like Joyce said, and like John also said, then what do we do? How do we flip it? How do we say, okay, yes, that makes me really sad, and it's still really important to me. What am I going to do about that now? I realized this fall, as I have a 7-year-old who went into first grade, that I could spend this entire year lamenting all the things he was missing by not being in school. He's doing the Missoula Online Academy, so he's home. He's only doing online schooling. And heading into the fall, I was feeling everything that he was going to miss. He's only actually done 6 months of in-person school. He doesn't know any different, really. And it wasn't going to do any good for me to spend 9 months telling him all the things that he wasn't experiencing because of COVID. And so I had to recognize my grief, I had to name it, give myself the space that I needed, and then try to flip that of saying, okay, what does this allow us to do? What can we do? How do I look through into this year with him and all the opportunities that we have that we wouldn't have normally had? Because it doesn't do any good for me to tell him everything that he's missing out on. He doesn't know any better. So I'm thinking about Thanksgiving or Turkey Day. And one of the values that I really hold about this time of year is gratitude. I went to seminary in Canada, and their Thanksgiving is in October, which I much prefer an October Thanksgiving to a November Thanksgiving. And their story of Thanksgiving, at least as it was told to me, centers around the harvest. And so it taught me, listening to my Canadian friends, about what it meant to practice gratitude and Thanksgiving, whether there'd been a huge storm and the harvest had all been lost, or if they'd been able to bring in the whole harvest. Either way, Thanksgiving showed up, and they practiced being grateful in their lean years and in their years of plenty. And that has stuck with me. And so again, this year may be that year where it is really a practice or a discipline to live into that gratitude of the season when there's so many things that are not the way we think they should be or the way we would like them to be. I have shared with Val and Laura a bunch of resources leading toward Advent. I'm actually going to send one to them tonight that has some Thanksgiving things. One is a book called Faithful Families. I'm not even going to try to screen share just in case. Called Faithful Families, and it's by Tracy Smith, and she has an Advent and Christmas book specifically for Advent and Christmas. She has another one for all year round, but it's she's a pastor, and she writes about how do we, as our children's primary faith teachers, because even when we could all go to church and take our children to Sunday school, the family, the home, whoever's in the home, is still the primary faith teachers. They're learning from us first. And so she takes that and has all sorts of ideas of taking everyday moments that already happen and helping us bring our faith into that. One is like if you put a star on your tree, to just recognize the stars in Scripture, and to say that in Scripture it was a guiding light to where Jesus was, and let the star be a light for us this season. Super simple. You didn't have to do anything different, and yet it brings your faith into the space of your home. Another resource is Illustrated Ministry. I used this a lot when I was a pastor. We would put it in our bulletins. If we had intergenerational time, there's tons of beautiful coloring pages that you can send out to people and have them color parts of it and then send them back to you. They have an illustrated devotional for an intergenerational gathering. You can send that to extended families and gather once a week during the Advent season on Zoom and go through that devotional together with all ages. Just so many ideas. And then the third one is a woman called, I think it's Sybil McCall, and she has written Praying with Color. And this I have found particularly helpful for seasons where we don't have words to talk about or to say our prayers because we don't actually know what we want to pray or how we want to pray. In my life, this happened when I was in a season of waiting for our second child. We were in the adoption process for 4.5 years. 5 years? I don't know. I don't remember anymore. But that becomes a very complex situation because what do you pray in a season waiting for adoption? As a family who wants to receive a child into their family, knowing that another scenario has to take place in order for that to happen. So I didn't have words to pray during that season. And so Sybil came to me in that time. God brought her into my life. And so I'm just going to show you some of mine so you know you don't have to be really good. This says Grace, but it's probably backwards, right? I wrote my friend Grace's name one day, and then for the next month, each day I would add a different color and just color a little bit here and there. This was me in the middle of adoption, taking the Romans passage that says, the longer the waiting goes, the deeper the ache. And it's a Mobius strip. You don't have to be I'm not an artist. It's just doodling and praying, and you can do it as a family. She uses the definition of delighting in the presence of God. And so that has been really great in my family and in my life personally. I'm a pastor. I could go on, and I'm going to stop, but I want to leave you with 2 things that you yourself can take and do immediately. And the first has to do with that perfection piece. And I will tell you, I heard this in college and it didn't stick until these last 3-4 years. And it's just stop shoulding on yourself. Just take the word out of your vocabulary. You can always replace should with could. And that gives you agency, and it gives you the choice, and it allows you to make a decision without the shame or the guilt that we feel when we should. So you can do that. So that's one free gift for you tonight. And then the second is, again, about perfection. I did a meditation that was to help me go to sleep one night, and they tell you to lay down and get in your bed all comfortable. And then she's like, close your eyes, take a deep breath. And think, is there one thing I can do to make myself 5% more comfortable? And I'm like, oh yeah, I'm actually clenching my jaw or my brow or whatever. And I decided that 5% rule can go anywhere in life. Is there anything, especially the things that I don't want to do or the things that don't feel right, what can I do to make it 5% more enjoyable? Can I have a cup of coffee while I'm doing it? Can I light a candle? And so that's just a grace to give ourselves that opportunity of, it doesn't have to be 99% better, but is there something that we can do to help it be 5% better? Thank you for the opportunity to talk. You will get all these resources. Laura and Val have them, and I will send them the Thanksgiving ones as well.
Thank you so much, Courtney, and everybody, all of you 4 panelists. Gosh, for your knowledge and experience and sharing with us. You're so appreciated. I am going to turn off the recording. If you're watching this later recorded, thank you. God bless you. There's just such a good amount of helpful info here. And go in peace.